With the introduction of the latest Archon quest, Caribert, some of Sumeru's world quests, and Kaeya's fated encounter with Dainsleif, more questions have arisen about Kaeya than ever before. Kaeya is understood to be a very suspicious and mysterious character, and therefore not really understood at all. This 3-part video series will attempt to explain everything we really know about Kaeya, alongside reasonable speculation based on the cookie crumbs and hints we've been given. If you're a Kaeya fan like me, then this video series is for you. This is the Unlikely Genshin Gamer, and welcome to my analysis of Cavalry Captain Kaeya. Now, I don't intend to rehash Kaeya's character stories as a way to tell you about him, as sadly a lot of videos about him do. His stories will be mentioned instead to pick them apart, to really break down our understanding of his character. Standard spoiler warnings apply up to version 3.7, so beware. There is truly a lot to unpack, so let's start at the beginning of everything, Kaeya's childhood. By now, everyone knows that Kaeya was abandoned by his father in Mondstadt as a child for a so far undisclosed purpose. But I propose we take a moment here to really analyze what happened on that day and what it could all mean, because there is a lot. Kaeya was presumably left between the ages of 7 to 9 years old. I say this because he told Varka that the fabricated grape juice story of his abandonment was 10 years ago. The date can be assumed to be true because that could easily be fact-checked by the Knights. If he is younger than Diluc, as stated by his description as a sworn younger brother, then that should mean he was no older than 18 when Krepus died. So, if Kaeya spoke to Varka about his past a little before or after the incident, then 10 years prior puts him at the age of between 7 and 9. Why is this important? Because leaving an 8-year-old in a completely foreign land, outside, in the hopes of him being compassionately taken in by a noble family of Mondstadt, and the child not running away, succumbing to the elements, accidentally giving himself and his origin away, or simply leaving to look for his father in desperation, is exceptionally risky, unless certain things were already known or they were just that desperate. Simply put, their plan could have failed in so many ways before it got started. But it didn't. Perhaps he was left on a day that would storm to increase the chances of being taken in. Perhaps he was deliberately left with the Ragnavinders, a noble family, for their compassion. Or was it because of the upbringing he would receive? But what if Master Krepus didn't raise him as his own son, but rather took him in only for that night, and then sent him to an orphanage afterwards? Would not the chances of someone taking him in be higher if he were left in or even near the city itself? Why was his father so sure that his little son would keep quiet about the ancient plot that he knew about for as long as he did? And what sort of role could Kaeya play, left as he was without a handler? Did they not think he would defect to the people he was raised and loved by, as he eventually did? So many questions. So, what do I propose in answer to them? Well, to start, I think the whole operation was a mixture of cunning and desperation. After all, an operation featuring one's last hope will be, by definition, both daring and meticulous. First, I'm almost certain that the Ragnavinder house was a deliberate choice. As I said before, the chance of him being taken in safely would have been almost undoubtedly higher if he were left in the city, and I really don't think that they didn't know where Mondstadt City was. No, Kaeya's father wanted him at the winery. According to Clothar, the Albrecht line, if not royal, was definitely a noble line of Kha'enri'ah. And based on the one letter Kaeya kept from his father, they ruled the troubled kingdom as regents for a time, the first being Knight Marshal and Fortis of the legendary Schwanenritter Knights. Kaeya's father also doesn't strike me as a heartless man. As we heard at the end of Weinlesefest, he left Kaeya reluctantly, and the note Kaeya has hidden subtly depicts a loving father teaching his young son how to write an important lesson from the family history, despite the fact that it was just to be burned soon anyway. I do believe at least one reason he chose the wine tycoon specifically was to allow Kaeya a noble's life, perhaps one closest to what he would have been used to. After all, I highly suspect he did grow up in some form of khaenri'ah environment, if this line is to be believed. His father had abandoned him in this strange and unknown land to fulfill this mission. To describe the place he found himself as a strange and unknown land seems to indicate that he hadn't grown up in a normal place like Sumeru or something. He even told the traveler that he's only been to Sumeru once and only very briefly. In all honesty, Kaeya may have been put in Mondstadt with this family simply for safekeeping, but with the expectation that if the countries were ever to go to war, he would be loyal to his home, knowing his part to play in the conflict. I've often considered the possibility that Kaeya was put in Mondstadt to thrive and grow and eventually rise in rank in the city, to be able to hand it over if required, and he has arguably done so. Varka is absent and Jean is spread so thinly that increasingly more duties and liberties are placed with Kaeya, and at least for now, he has the ability to hand over the keys of the city if he were so inclined. As for why Kaeya was trusted to keep still and quiet for all that time, well, I think that may have been largely a matter of working with limited resources and personnel. He's their only hope, after all. Kaeya was obviously an intelligent, clever child, and the unfamiliar environment might have certainly helped him keep quiet about his mission. But it was a risk giving that kind of information to a child either way. And if Kaeya was telling the truth to the traveler when we meet up with him in Sumeru, he did try to go back home when he was still very new to Mondstadt and the Ragnavinders. He undoubtedly felt abandoned after enough time had passed. The situation surrounding his mission and his loyalties seriously deserves more in-depth analysis, so you'll have to stay tuned for the rest of the series for that. Still, the reasoning behind why Kaeya's father, or the Albrecht clan as a whole, deemed him to be their last hope is largely unknown, but either way, the burden of such a responsibility on a child, the pull between loyalty, duty, and happiness is a heavy one that was ever present in Kaeya's mind. This is partly why I find it telling that as inopportune as the timing of Kaeya's unloading of the truth was, the fury Diluc felt should have been momentary between best friends and sworn brothers. Simply put, Kaeya had been a kid spy when they took him in, and was now coming clean because of recent events and guilt. We know he really did tell the truth because he earned a vision for his troubles. So why respond so furiously? If Kaeya hadn't gained the vision during that fight, Diluc could have easily done something he could have regretted. Unless Kaeya perhaps told him something more. Something that at least at the time seemed nigh unforgivable. Something we don't know yet. It's the only thing that can reconcile in my mind why Diluc, even heartbroken and furious, would not have just sent Kaeya away, denounced him as his brother, or turned him out on the street, but instead fought him so fiercely. And the topic of that ill-fated fight brings me to the issue of Kaeya's eye. We learn in the Hidden Strife event letters that Kaeya's right eye is actually scarred from that fight, and based on the responses to the letters Kaeya wrote him, pretending it's blinded, Diluc seems mostly unapologetic about it. And although they seem to be in a better place with each other now, I still wonder about the injury and the fight that caused it. Kaeya used to pretend to be a one-eyed pirate with that eye, and has jokingly told us that his grandfather was one too. He's been accustomed to covering that eye. In the manga, when we see Kaeya before the fight, as Crepus was dying, he has it on then too. Consider for a moment the mechanics of a fight against a pyro-wielding claymore user that would result in an eye injury serious enough to come close to blinding said eye. What kind of strike was that? What was Diluc trying to do? I can't imagine he used his greatsword to do it unless he intended to kill him. So, was it a searing punch instead? Did Diluc deliberately aim for the side of his face that other khaenri'ahs like Dainsleif and Pierrot have covered? The side Kaeya has frequently covered. Did something that Kaeya told him that night lead Diluc to aim in such a manner? Is something actually different about that eye? To cover it is to say that something is wrong with it just as much as leaving it bare and scarred would, right? Unless what the eye patch suggests to others is a more favorable tale than the truth beneath the cloth. Considering this, Kaeya may very well harbor more secrets under that eye patch than just battle scars. He can still see, yet chooses the impairment of having one eye covered rather than show it. Is he protecting Diluc or himself? Does anyone else, like Jean or Lisa, know what's underneath? Or know any inkling of what happened? Some of the others, although lightheartedly, try to protect Kaeya from Diluc. Maybe they are more aware of the tension than they let on. Kaeya's relationship with his estranged brother is as complicated as Kaeya himself and deserves much more attention. I can't recall another pair of playable characters who have come to blows in such a way as to leave one with a permanent injury like these two former brothers, which is actually pretty sad. So, this tattered relationship, in addition to Kaeya's unclear loyalties and his unsavory relationship with the truth, will be covered in the next video. Lastly, I'll explain why everything we know about Kaeya, Kha'enri'ah, and Dainsleif, including what we learned in the Caribert quest, prove that Kaeya is an important character to the overarching story. Thanks for sticking with me this far. Like, share, and consider subscribing if you liked it, and I hope to see you in the next one.